Hello and welcome to All Indians Matter. I am Ashraf Engineer. The Naxal insurgency in India has been active since 1967, seeking ultimately to overthrow the government and establish communist rule. At its peak, the insurgency was said to be active across 40% of India's landmass, with the so called Red Corridor spanning eastern, central, and southern India. However, in its current form, it is said to have been reduced to 70 districts, down from 180 in 2009, across 10 states that are coal or mineral rich and in remote forested clusters, mainly in the Dandakaranya, Chhattisgarh, Odisha region and the tri-junction of Jharkhand, Bihar, and West Bengal. The Naxalites target security forces, government workers, and other symbols of the Indian state in what they say is a fight for land and human rights and for the poor and tribals to retain their lands, resources, and way of life in the face of a sustained assault from a government industry nexus. What is this insurgency all about? Is it what it claims to be? What is the role of the state and industrial corporations in sparking it? Most importantly, what are the people right at the center of it saying?
All Indians matter.
We have on the show Ashutosh Bhardwaj, a bilingual journalist and author. He has traveled across central India and documented the conditions of tribes caught in the conflict between the insurgents and the police. He has invested encounter killings, cases of political corruption, and electoral malpractices. He is the only journalist in India to have won the prestigious Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism for 4 consecutive years. In 2015, he was shortlisted for the Reuters Kurt Schock Awards in International Journalism. He is the author of the book Dandakaranya, The Death Script. From 2011 to 2015, Ashutosh lived in the Red Corridor and made several trips thereafter, reporting on the Maoists, state atrocities, and lives caught in the crossfire. In the death script, he writes of his time there, of the men and women he met from both sides of the conflict, bringing home the human cost of such a battle. The book was shortlisted for the Tata List Fest 2020 award and won the Best Nonfiction Book of the Year 2020 at a Galata Award. Welcome, Ashutosh.
Thank you so much, Ashraf.
Ashutosh, give us a sense of the origins of the insurgency and how it spread.
Ashraf, there had been violent ultra left insurgencies in India since the late 1940s. But the Naxal insurgency, that can be seen as the immediate predecessor of the present guerrilla fighters, that insurgency erupted in a village of West Bengal called Naxalbari in 1967, when the police opened fire at a group of peasants protesting against landlords. Soon, this armed movement spread to various parts of Bengal and Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, and several guerrilla groups were formed in these states. And finally, in 1980s, a group of guerrillas from Andhra Pradesh entered Dandakaranya slash Bassar to make it their base area. Now, this single movement, this step, it changed the face of the insurgency thereafter.
Yeah, making it just so much more widespread and so much more of a.
Yeah, yeah.
Ashutosh, while in the initial stages, it was a pushback, like you said, against what they called class enemies, such as oppressive landlords. Today, it's widened to oppose the government industry complex. Could you explain that evolution to our listeners?
See, in the initial years, as I noted, it erupted in a village. And the insurgency then was spontaneous. It was against landlords. It was a fight to reclaim their land. Their objectives were limited, at times even ambiguous. As several groups were formed, there was not enough clarity about the nature of objectives, the nature of violence that was required to achieve these objectives. Various guerrilla outfits they introduced their own variations. In the later decades, it eventually became a war against the Indian state, which could be won by overthrowing the state by violence. Now, as the Naxals came to occupy a large part of central Indian forest, where a number of industries are eyeing the mineral wealth, the battle to save jungle and Jameen also became a part of the objective. So, in a nutshell, this is how the insurgency has evolved over the last 50, 60 years. At first, a spontaneous uprising against landlords. Several guerrilla groups are being formed. They have their own styles, own methods. Then finally, overthrowing the state by violence, a war against the Indian state, establishment of their own state. And now, as they enter the Indian central Indian forest, a very crucial component of the Adivasi demand, that is save Jal, Jangal or Jameen, that has also been incorporated into their wider ambit.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that you mentioned that, because it's just evolved along with the way the Indian economy or the Indian approach to society and the economy has also evolved. I think that's a very fascinating link between the two. Ashutosh, you've traveled extensively through the Red Corridor, and I've been told from time to time that many parts of it, there is actually no such thing as the Indian state there. So, how much evidence is there of the Indian state, or is it completely Naxal dominated in parts?
So, Ashutosh, this the quote unquote red corridor, it's a very difficult forest terrain. It's a porous landscape. We first need to understand the landscape. I mean, it's not like Bombay or Delhi or any metropolitan, any plain city. Most of these are dense, thick forests with huge natural reserves. So this porous landscape sees both the Indian state as well as the Naxals engaged in a conflict. So I would say that it's a kind of an overlapping dual citizenship, dual control. There are certain areas where the Indian state is present, and yet that presence is being consistently contested by the guerrilla fighters. There are certain areas which are totally dominated by the Naxalites only. I mean, where the state has absolutely no presence. Now, coming to your question, how to quantify that area? I mean, it's very, very difficult because it's a porous boundaries. They do not have their permanent base camps at any place. There are some small spots like Abujmar or in some areas in southern Bastar. Otherwise, this landscape, it keeps transforming. It's a hydra. It's a shape shifting entity.
Yeah, like an amoeba almost. Ashutosh, where do the Naxalites get their arms from?
Mostly they snatch from the police. There are some instances of purchasing ammunition, I mean bullets from the black market, but their weapons and arms are mostly looted from the police. They are able to make a little bit in their small factories, like small guns and small bombs, some RDX, some gelatin induced bombs as well. But the suspicion that is normally the conspiracy theory that is normally being floated around, that they are getting arms from either Pakistan or China, that has not found any evidence in the last 40 years or so. So it's mostly looted by the police, looted from the police. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do they finance their operations?
Extortion, levy, I think there's enough documentation available on it. 10% cut on any contractor working in their area, be it a NREGA contractor or my big mining company. That's how they do it. I have written extensively on it.
Yes, you have. And I believe in many areas they have their own systems of governance, taxation, justice delivery, or call it kangaroo courts, which depends on which side of the divide you're on. Give us a sense of that.
See, this is among the most significant part of the Naxal insurgency. I mean, this separates them from any other military or militant organization. Why? Because they are not just waging a war against the nation, they have also been able to create, wherever possible, parallel forms of governance. So, one such form in Dandakaranya is called as Janatana Sarkar, which is in English would be people's government. So, how do they function? At lowest level, they have a bunch of villagers who are nominated or selected by them, who will oversee various kinds of works that are being taking place in that area, be it the NREGA works of construction of pulia or canal, like, and sometimes they, as the word you used, kangaroo court, their own janadalat. So this is their own method of justice delivery. Whenever they suspect anybody of being a police informer or having committed another crime, then they call that person into their court, and then they do a public trial, which is among the most barbaric forms of practices that they have been adopting. But one thing I would like to emphasize here, that they have very meticulously documented the details of areas under their control. For instance, in interior areas of Bastar, the government has not been able to conduct even a proper census. But you wouldn't believe that they have details of each and every person in a family, in a hut. Not just that, the number of hens, goats, the quantity of food grains which a family has. So this is their regular data collection. So through this, they are able to keep a tab on what is happening into their area, in their area.
And it just adds to what you said about, there being a parallel form of government almost.
Yes, yes, yes.
Ashutosh, one of the reasons Naxals enjoy support from some tribal communities is what they term structural violence by the state. This includes land being taken away for purposes like mining, as you also mentioned earlier. Tell us how this works. I mean, do the affected tribals have no recourse?
Well, we know that the Indian state somehow doesn't want to listen to the plight of those who do not have a political voice or who do not have a uh, pressure group, so to say. Now, these Adivasis who have no vote bank of their own, they are among the worst victims of the state's atrocities. Their land is being snatched away fraudulently for mining without any compensation, despite stiff opposition. And in the state of that huge disillusionment, they find the Naxals an easy option. We need to understand that the Naxals are nobody, but I mean, they are not foreign militants. They have not come from outside. They are ultimately people from the land, from that area itself. So when they have certain grievances against the state, against the government, which the state doesn't want to resolve, then they can be easily lured by the other side. This is how it happens. This is how the structural violence is able to nourish Naxalism over the years.
Ashutosh, you would have come across several stories in this context in your travels there, during your stay there. Tell us maybe one or two that stayed with you.
Okay, take this case. In 2014, I was staying in a Naxal camp. There I came across a younger squad leader called Jailal. I have written about him in my book, so I can name him here as well. So this young man called Jailal was among the most innocent and gullible people you would come across. But why did he join the insurgency? He was in class 5 or 6 when the BJP government in 2005 signed a contract with the Tatas for a major steel plant in Bastar. There were massive protests against that steel plant. People didn't want to give their land for mining. They don't want to give their land for the plant. But the government went ahead. So several young people from the who were part of the protest, they then switched over. They then took up the arms. Now the irony is, the Tatas could not begin that plant. They had to eventually shelve their plant, shelve their project, and quit Bastar forever. But many of those who then joined the Naxals rank, they are still with them.
So this is how an insurgency is born and perpetuates. It's fascinating.
Yes, exactly.
Earlier, in one of my earlier episodes, I interviewed the tribal poet Jacinta Kerketa, and she described to me how, among the other ways the state intrudes into tribals' lives, is through security camps that tribals have to cross to get to their own homes. They often have to prove their own identity to simply access the areas they have lived in for generations. What are the other ways in which the state intrudes?
See, we must note that the state is always trying to enter these areas, right? And we should also at least acknowledge that if this land belongs to India, then the state would try as many possible ways to mark its stamp on its territory. This is for sure. Now, the question is at what cost and at what descent? So, how does the state do it? The state is, it's not just about this is the only example, the example that you gave, that when the it's through security camps, but you can say that intrusion is also through when the state builds roads and bridges in the jungles, when trees are uprooted to build roads. Many Adivasis also consider that as an intrusion because their forest is being uprooted. But Ashraf, I would like to point here that this is a very difficult debate. I have not been able to resolve it. What is intrusion and what is not? For instance, on the one hand, you do need health and education facilities for Adivasis, no doubt about it. But can you take quality health to interior forest without having roads? So it's a tricky question. I mean, roads are necessary if we were to take quote unquote development there, if we were to take uh, health and education there. But we also know that once you have roads, not just this health and education, these basic facilities, you will have an entire market going inside, and of course the security camps as well. So it's a very difficult question. How do we categorize it? Is it an intrusion or is it a necessary marker of a civilization?
Yeah, and this has been the eternal debate, hasn't it? When we talk about economic progress, I mean, what is progress
Exactly.
and what is not, and how far can you go when it comes to all of
I mean, on one hand, you are always crying, or you are always saying that Adivasis don't have health, which is true. But can you have health in an area which is 60 kilometers inside without constructing roads?
impossible, virtually.
Impossible. And once you have roads, I mean, can you stop the private person, the market, Pepsi, Coca Cola, Uncle Chips from going inside?
Or tourists, for that matter.
Yeah, for that matter, forget security camps. That's one issue altogether.
Yeah, yeah,
But so this is a very complex debate.
yeah.
Maybe, yeah,
Yeah, I think that probably is several such episodes, not just one. We come
right,
to
right.
it. But Ashutosh, let's talk about something else that's really horrific. There have been accusations of atrocities by security forces. I'm referring here specifically to the rape of tribal women, and this has been an ongoing charge. We've seen several cases and incidents around that. What did you discover during your journalism there?
Oh, that's totally true. There are many such instances. In any conflict zone, women are often the worst victims, no doubt about it. I have recorded several instances when Adivasi women were sexually assaulted, raped, and killed as well. So, like I can one instance that often comes to haunt me is of a minor girl who was gang raped and killed in July 2011 in Sarguja. And her postmortem report, well, I can say this because it's so offensive here to be recorded, but this is a fact that we must accept that this is how the Indian state has operated. So her postmortem report was tweaked to insert these words which I'm telling you now: having dilated vagina, habitual about sexual intercourse. I can bet, Ashraf, I have seen a number of postmortem reports in my life. I have never seen a one bloody report which will comment on the alleged behavior of a young girl of 16 years. Why do they do so? Because this then, I'm sorry that I'm getting a bit agitated, because then it gave the security forces and the government a reason to tarnish the character of that girl. And I have seen that report. This was not in that original report. These 7 words were later inserted in that report. And the then Home Minister, he went on record to say it before me. Arey, how can you say? The report says, how can you make that allegation against my men? The report clearly says she was habitual. I mean, the Home Minister of a sovereign state is telling me.
It's shocking. And Ashutosh, we know that there have been several such instances of of trying to tarnish the character of rape victims in such a manner. And even if the girl was sexually habitual, was sexually active, that does not mean you can rape her.
But Ashraf, I'll intervene here. What is how can a postmortem report write this word?
Exactly, because that's not really the purpose of a postmortem
Postmortem
report.
report has to
What does the
tell why
postmortem
she
report?
was killed. What was the cause of the death?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So instead of focusing on her injuries or the fact that force was used, the folks for postmortem report tries to divert attention to her being a so-called loose character, which was, of course, not the case. But Ashutosh, look at the flip side. Similarly, there have been accusations of extortion, forceful recruitment, and kangaroo court justice against the Naxals. Did you see this too during your reporting?
The Naxals have a lot of blood on their hand. I mean, they are no priests of peace at all. The kind of atrocities they have committed on the Adivasis, I mean, they are also unmatchable. I have recorded instances when they tie somebody in the middle of a jungle, gather 200 people with the parents of that young boy present, and then they ask everybody to throw stones at that person, that young boy, till that boy is dead. And you can imagine that what impact would it have on the psyche of that family. I have known there are families who had been peacefully living in interior jungles, the families, the areas where the state had not even reached so far. But after such injustice, after such barbaric treatment by the Naxals, by the insurgents, these families were forced to leave out, forced to leave their village and come and live in a small hutment in a city.
Ashutosh, this is also a humanitarian crisis. Many have died, many have been rendered homeless, and you've met many of them, as you told us. What is life like being caught in the crossfire? I know you've already spoken quite a bit about that, but is there anything else that you would like to tell us?
Uh, it's very difficult. I would say that it's not just like being caught in the crossfire. If you are in Bastar, you are always in the crossfire. There's always a possibility of being caught by a bullet that can come from any side, or you can step on a landmine totally unsuspectingly, a landmine which will explode just by mere pressure. I tell you a little bit about it. A lot of people get killed by these landmines. In 2021 January, I was crossing through an area in Bastar. Some 20 or 25 minutes before, the security forces had detected an IED. Now, there are two kinds of IED, uh, these landmines. One that explode by a remote control, by a detonator. One that explodes merely by the pressure of your foot or by a or unsuspecting tire of a bicycle or a motorcycle. So just before 20 minutes I was to take that path, security forces had detected and diffused that IED. Had that group, that security forces would not have been on patrol on that morning, I would not have been here sitting before you today.
So, very, very close shave. You also met Naxals. What do they have to say?
Some of them are determined that they would fight till their end. Some of who are driven by ideology, by the Maoist or the leftist ideology, they believe that if not in this generation, maybe in the next generation or a couple of generations later, there will be a revolution. But there are also many who know that the revolution is impossible. They are hugely disillusioned, but they have no other option but to be in the jungle.
Ashutosh, do you see any hope that things will get better?
See, I'm an optimistic person. But I also know that in any democracy, the primary responsibility to ensure peace rests with the government, the state. The state is the custodian of the constitution. So it is up to the state to bring these guerrillas to the negotiating table, because we need to understand, we need to acknowledge that these are not foreign militants. Number one. Number two, they are not separatist. They are not demanding a separatist state. All they have is a bunch of constitutional demands. I mean, what are their demands? Their demand is that please do not begin mining in our area without a permission. Please do not uproot us. I understand, I agree that there are a large number of guerrillas are also who are ideological, who are driven by the ideology, who would anyway want to have an ultra leftist insurgency. But the number of those guerrillas is not very high. A large number of foot soldiers are Adivasis who join this battle because they find their land, their life being snatched away by the state, by the government. So if that can be put at a stop, at least they will not be having enough fodder, enough nourishment to run the insurgency. So it is the state's duty. Now, first stage, call the guerrilla leaders to negotiation. Number two, to ensure that there are no more violation of their rights in the jungle. If that happens, I don't see any reason why this insurgency should flourish beyond a few years.
So, tell us about your book, Danda Karanya, The Death Script.
It's difficult to talk about one book. So I went to Chhattisgarh in August 11, my this Naxal assignment, and at that time I didn't realize it was going to be a red corridor assignment. I just went there to cover a state called Chhattisgarh. But Chhattisgarh then, as now, happened to be the capital or headquarters of the Naxal insurgency. So obviously, the maximum focus was on that. And soon I realized, considering the complication and the complexity of the issue, mining, jungle, right, Forest Act, state, Adivasi, guerrilla, violence, treachery, security forces, police, CRPF, BSF, ITBP. So I knew it's a very complicated issue. It has to be dealt with, probably only through a book. So while I was doing my journalism for Indian Express, I had also started working on this book. And then it took several years, several drafts, several additions and deductions that I came. So this book is about partly about my own experiences in the jungle and my own observations on violence, on treachery, on love, on life, and about living in the jungle and writing on the jungle. When I say the jungle here, I mean that is a conflict ridden, a war torn jungle, not your any wildlife sanctuary.
So, Ashutosh, here's a question I all ask all my guests. What is the motivation to do this work? Why do you do this work?
Just to tell stories, just to observe the life around me and tell people what is it. I think any writer, any journalist is driven by this prime motive only, that they come across certain facts, certain observations, certain incidents which they feel that have not been told enough, that they want to tell the story, and that is it.
In all my years of journalism, this is perhaps one of the most evocative explanations of why we do journalism in the first place. We want to tell a story, and we want to make people understand what it is that is happening around them, why they're experiencing what they do. Ashutosh, the Naxal insurgency is not just one of our most significant internal threats, but also a hugely complex one, as you've explained that we can't possibly discuss fully on an episode like this. But thanks so much for helping us understand it better, for unraveling it for us at a basic level.
Thank you so much, Ashraf. Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me to your show. I hope I was able to make some sense to the readers, to the listeners, and to you, of course. And most of these issues that you asked me, I have dealt with in my book at great length. So you can go through that as well.
Sure. And it's available online, all platforms.
Yeah, everywhere it is that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ashraf.
Thank you all for listening. Please visit allindiansmatter.in, that's ALLINDIANSMATTER.in for more columns and audio podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at Ashraf Engineer, that's ASHRAFENGINEER, and All Indians Count, that's ALLINDIANSCOUNT. Search for the All Indians Matter page on Facebook. On Instagram, the handle is All Indians Matter. Email me at editor@allindiansmatter.in. Catch you again soon.